everyone! I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and sometimes when you're yarn shopping, you find yarn on clearance that is a really interesting base or construction, but the color isn't necessarily what you want for a project. And so today I'm going to do a demonstration of over-dyeing a deeper color of yarn. Not that this is deep, this is more medium toned, but we are going to over dye this through a dip dyeing technique. And through the technique we may preserve some of the original color, but also add a little bit more dimension to this yarn. This yarn has a gorgeous chain construction, and the base is called Sequence. It's a bulky weight yarn from KnitPicks, but I think it was like a limited edition yarn, so I don't think it's available anymore. But the original color was called Dove Gray. This yarn is 70% merino wool, 30% baby alpaca. It is really, really soft, and the color is grayish. It's a very warm gray. And I actually don't dislike this color at all, but I thought that it would be really fun to take this and over dye it. So that's exactly what we're gonna do today. There are a few different directions we could go for the over dyeing, but I think I want to go for a red. I think that a red would work really pretty to give us, even if it's not as concentrated, some more dusty rose type colors. Even a little bit of pink on top of this I think would be really lovely. So we're going to start with a 1% stock solution of Dharma acid dyes in the color Poinsettia. However, before we start dyeing this really fun non-superwash yarn, I do want to add some removable nylon zip ties and pre-soak the yarn in plain tap water for at least 30 minutes. So that way it is nice and well saturated. This is so soft. The only thing that I am not nervous but sad about is that, and maybe I should just take, I don't know if I'd be able to keep it, but I think I might just take a little bit of a snip from this tie. So we have a little bit of the original color to compare to whatever we end up with. It's not as good as a proper snip of yarn, but I'm going to save this with the label. In this pot I have 32 cups of water plus 8 tablespoons of white vinegar, and I am going to add 100 milliliters of our Poinsettia dye. And I'm just rinsing out the graduated cylinder. This is a lot of dye that we have here. It's enough that we should definitely see a color change on our yarn. I am a hair concerned that because this is non-superwash, that the dye is going to strike pretty slowly, but we won't know until we start dip dyeing. And so if we need to, we can always add more acid to the pot to help color strike faster if we want them to. So I'm going to keep heating this up until we get to a boil, and then we'll start dip dyeing. All right, we are not yet at a simmer, but we are hot and steamy, and so this is a good time to start. I'm popping on my gloves, and I did remove a lot of the liquid from the yarn with just a gentle squeeze. And now we're going to start dip dyeing. So the yarn is very cold right now, and the dye bath obviously is not cold. It is quite quite warm, but even though this is non-superwash, I think that there's a greater risk of felting when you go from super hot to super cold. And that is because when you warm up fibers, they relax and sort of move out of their position a little bit. But and then if you go too cold too quickly, it could shock the fibers and therefore cause felting. But if we do a little bit slower at the other end and let it cool down, then the fibers can kind of go back where they're supposed to go. And should move that to be similar spot. So far, so good. I am really, really trying to go slow. Even though I probably should have brought over a step stool because I'm standing up on my tiptoes. But you can see that as we add more yarn in, the color is getting lighter and lighter. And I do think I'm going to eventually want to add all the yarn in, but I do want to go slow enough so that, yeah, that we get like some decent coverage. And when I eventually add all the yarn in, I don't want things to end up being really all one color if I go too fast. Now, the other thing I'm doing here is I am moving the yarn a lot, and this is serving two purposes. One, it's allowing dye to access some of the interior of the skeins a little bit more, just by moving, because you can see like as the yarn goes down, it sort of spreads out all over the bottom of the pot. But this is also preventing like a sharp demarcation line. If I put the yarn in and sort of left it here and went off and came back, there would be more of a line versus a smoother type transition that you can see here. And the pot is looking significantly lighter. So I am going to go ahead and add this end in now so we can get, yeah, some of that coverage. And I think I'll just go ahead and add the whole thing in. Now we may end up seeing more color absorption around that lighter tip, or we might not, but I'm going to bring the heat down to low, and I'm going to let this heat for, I'd say, about 30 minutes, and then we'll come and check in. It's been 30 minutes, and let's check. Oh, that is looking really, really clear. All right, I am going to turn off the heat, which is on low, and I'm gonna leave the yarn in here for a bit to cool. I'll eventually take it out to let it finish cooling, but for now, there's no harm with leaving it in the dye pot. But anyway, once the yarn is cool, then we can go wash it. Let's wash our dip dyed yarn. We did end up seeing a little bit of some color transfer towards the top, but this color is so pretty, and it just changes the whole feeling of the yarn. Even leaving some of the original color behind. You don't have to completely cover something up when you are over dyeing. I'm now going to add just a little bit of some clear dish soap and then fill the basin back up with water. All right. I am not seeing any red come out. Yeah, so I think we are pretty good. I'm now going to carefully rinse out the rest of the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and hang it up to dry. And here is our finished yarn. I really, really like the depth of the red that we got from combining this, I guess, grayish. It's brownish, but a cool toned brown color, and using the red over it, we really did transform it. Now, if you were making a hat out of this, I think that you would get some kind of spiraling, pooling of where the colors are placed. Just, that is my, I guess, gut of what this might do, but it's hard to say for sure until you try to knit it up. It's not a perfect ombre. There's some variation and hints of pink at the lighter end, and you can see some places the darkest section goes longer than other sections. But the yarn held up so well, and it's still very, very fluffy. You can still very much see the definition of the cool chain plied construction. It is a little bit stuck to itself, but it does separate like really, really easily, and I would not call it felted. I didn't pay attention to if it stuck to itself a lot when we started with this. Remember that little bit of the original color that I saved? We definitely still have some of the original color in here, but that's by design with what we did when we were dip dyeing it. we could have covered it all completely, but I was afraid of letting the yarn go in the pot a little too soon because I wanted there to be contrast between the two ends, and we definitely achieved that. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. You are not limited to dyeing bare yarn or yarn that is mostly just off-white. Certainly you can find bare undyed yarns that have blends of natural colors in them where they aren't white, but a lot of the yarn I do dye on this channel starts out as a pretty blank canvas. And so you can create really fun custom colors with overdying, finding yarn in a clearance bin or what have you. And so never be afraid to try to transform something into something else. Although if you are a little bit nervous and say you love the yarn but you're not sure how the color will layer on top of it, go ahead and undo one of the ties and take a snip of the yarn. Take a little snip, I mean maybe a couple inches, so bigger than this, and dye the little sample to see if the colors will work. This is something that I did once where I was dyeing a natural deep brown yarn. I did some tests to see if the colors that I wanted to use would even show up against that base. Because sometimes something might be dark enough that you don't know if it'll work, and you don't necessarily want to go through the whole process of dyeing if it's not necessarily going to work the way you want. And I suppose this goes for a lot of different kinds of color development and planning. Trying to dye like a tiny little snip to think, okay, is this color going to get me in the ballpark of what I want, can be really useful. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I always publish new content every Tuesday and Friday mornings, and sometimes there's lots of extra videos every month that come out at other random times, and I don't want you to miss any of it because I love playing with color and yarn, and one of my goals for 2022 is to play with a lot more of these random yarn bases that I collected with intent of dyeing or overdying, and to play with and just show different ways you can play with different types of yarn. It doesn't have to be bare yarn. If you would like to learn more about any of the yarn bases and things that I do use in my videos, I don't think this particular base is still available, but I do buy a lot of bare yarn and already dyed yarn, dyed colors from KnitPicks. And so one thing I really enjoy about that is that I can buy a true black and then get a pastel in the same yarn base that I can create a hand-dyed colorway to do some kind of color work project. And so that is something that when I was getting started made me feel more comfortable. So I have KnitPicks affiliate links down in the video description that you can go check out. I do also have a Patreon where you can get some behind the scenes sneak peeks and early access to some new content. I will have a link for that down in the video description as well. Thank you so much for watching.